Hello and welcome to the Tiny But Mighty podcast, where we celebrate small businesses exclusively, always. I'm E, your host and founder of Main Street eMarket. I hope that you are subscribed or following to this channel wherever you are watching or listening to this episode. I am so excited that you joined us today for a special first part of a two-part series with Dwight Thompson, aka the Right Warrior, who is, and I am going to read this to make sure that I get this correct, a gospel poet, project specialist, developmental editor and author, and lead writer for the Right Warrior business and creative writing services. This episode is for you if you have a story to tell. And that's pretty much all of us, right? But if you are looking to make a business out of your writing, if you are looking for support with writing or publishing, this is definitely the episode for you. And in the next episode, we're going to talk more about how writing shows up for your small business. So you probably want to listen to this one so that you're prepared for that one as well. I'm so excited for you to meet my friend. I'm going to bring him up to the stage now. Welcome.
Salutations, blessings. How you doing today, Erica? Happy
Aw.
Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday. I am well. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful, blessed and highly favored.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to be able to join me today. We had the longest pre-interview call because we had so many different things that we were talking about. And that really is what resulted in this two-part series. And I'm so excited to be able to have you share all of your insights because I learned so much in our hour-long call.
No, definitely. I'm all about poetry, publishing, and purpose, right? And the intersection of those three things, not just in my personal life and in my brand, but also for all of us. Like, I believe we all have a poet within us that's just begging and crying to be released, and we all have a story to tell. And of course, even if you're in a 9 to 5, you should be building some type of third, second, fourth income stream, doing something that fulfills your purpose.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for that introduction. That's amazing. So yes, like I said, this episode's for everybody. You got to stick around. Everybody's got a story to tell. So tell us a little bit about yourself before getting to this place here and having this company and small business that you have created.
Well, originally from the Caribbean, and one of the things I realized growing up is you have to be grateful. We would have times when we would be starving. We would have times where we were in an abundance of food, right? And we would have times where we would find the perfect friends at church or at school. And then sometimes you'll be on a mountaintop looking after the goats, just by yourself, reflecting. And that attitude has stuck with me throughout. And for the past 12 years pre-COVID, I was working for the government, doing my thing in South Florida. And then COVID happened. And I realized in all of the turmoil and all the chaos, what am I to do with myself? How am I supposed to take care of my family? What is the reason for who I am and the skills and the gifts I have? And I did a personal SWOT analysis on myself. I did prayer and meditation, read my Bible, and it came that out of everything I've been doing, writing has always been paramount, right? Faith, mental health are all captured within the writing discipline. And so I started doing my research. I called all the authors I knew locally and nationally. I went on different forums, different websites, Facebook groups, LinkedIn articles, Instagram posts, and started talking. How do you publish your book in 2020? How do you write your story? How do you make money from selling books or from helping others write their books? And at the end of it, I came up with a concept of having the Right Warrior and business and creative writing services, where not only can I publish my own books and be guests on different podcasts such as yours, Tiny But Mighty, Erica, but also I can introduce the entire writing world to folks who are looking to get involved or want to publish their family memoir or a book of poetry or even a subject matter expert book, and my favorite, a cookbook. There's no reason why we can't, with the technology that we have, with the understanding and the connections we can make any project possible.
Oh, I love that. And two things. One, we didn't talk about the cookbook, But a friend of mine is compiling recipes for a cookbook right now for an event that they're
Ooh,
hosting. And so I love this idea because making sure that it's in that kind of shareable format is so important. And I love the idea of preserving relationships through the passing down of those recipes too, because I feel like we've kind of lost the art of learning how to cook our family recipes. We're so busy and racing around that, we just rely on the fact that we're going to have those meals a couple times a year when we get to see those special family members, and we take that for granted without realizing that someday we need to be the ones carrying that torch if we'd like to continue sharing that love.
exactly. And our traditions are based on the oral tradition, right? We tell stories to each other. We pass along grandma's recipes in a tiny little box with that age-worn paper. And then the grandchild now becomes able to make this wonderful meal. And then the mom is like, wow, how did you make it like how grandma made it? And the child says, I found grandma's recipe book or her stack of notes and I followed the recipe or she showed me. And that's beautiful, right? To be able to pass down traditions in a written format orally is so important. And one of the recipes I put into my poetry memoir, right, because I'm a recovering foodie, is I put a recipe for stone soup. And stone soup is a common story. When I did my research, it's across many different cultures and nations.
Mhm.
And in essence, stories about a village that's suffering a famine and they are about to come to blows with each other because no one has any food. All the main granaries are empty. And then this old man walks into the village and he says, hey, come on here. I have a story to tell you. I see y'all are fighting, but I have a magic stone. And this magic stone can make the most delicious soup you've ever had. And the villagers, of course, they're desperate, they're hungry. They said, okay, fine, use it. What do you need? He said, I need a big pot with water. And he put it to boil. Then the water starts to boil. He drops the stone in. And then he said, oh, you know what? I need something else because the stone needs activation. And they're like, what do you need? He said, what do you have? Anyone has like a piece of carrot? And someone says, yeah, I have these two old carrots. They're dead nearly. He said, drop them in. Then someone says, oh, I have a piece of onion. Then someone says, oh, I have like this tiny piece of chicken bone. And over time, this huge pot is boiling with the most wonderful stew, wonderful soup ever made. And the concept behind the story was even when we think we have nothing, you'll be surprised if you put the little that you have, put it to work, what an amazing result you can find. And that's from a single recipe. Imagine an entire cookbook now. That could be an amazing project.
Wow. And it's so illustrative of community coming together. If neither of us has abundance, together we can still have abundance.
The Bible says, when one and one are gathered together. So now you have two in my name, all things are possible.
Wow. Very cool. We're at the question of trying to understand a little bit more business and creative services. What does that mean? Say more.
Oh, definitely. So let's start from the top. There's something I do which is called Holy Ghost writing, right? So I'm a ghostwriter, but specifically because, as you know, there are tons of genres of books for any type of faith-based book. So if you're working on a faith-based book, it could be a fantasy story similar to Chronicles of Narnia or Lord of the Rings. Or if you're working on a life memoir or a devotional, right? Tap in with me and we can co-author it together. If you just want me to be a silent Holy Ghost writer, we can do so also. And then I'll help you put together the concept behind the book. So we do something called developmental editing, which basically is we have a conversation about the purpose of the book. Why are you writing this book? Who's the target audience? Once someone finishes reading the book, what do you want to happen? Do you want them to maybe pass it on to their friend, put it on their bookshelf, donate it to the local library? Like, what does it look like once the book is finished? And then from there, we can strategize, okay, maybe what you're trying to do is a children's book because you seem to have a love for children and you want to impact young minds. And your story is about, I don't know, a rabbit who lost his carrot. and the rabbit is crying for his carrot, but then the mom rabbit comes and says, "Don't cry, there are more carrots in the garden." So that'd be a nice story for children to read and understand the value of forgiveness, and it's okay to cry and to have loss in their life. Something as simple as that might be a children's book. It might be a collection of short stories. It might be even a series of articles and blog posts that you can do as a social media that ties in with the book launch. So these are the things we look at: the Holy Ghost writing, developmental editing, and just trying to figure out the purpose of the book. On the other hand, if you're looking to do a SOP, which ties in with your business plan, right? They go hand in hand. If you have a business plan, you must have your methods of operation. You must have the policies and procedures in place in order to execute the steps, because you're not going to be doing it all the time. You may want to hire someone or delegate to someone else, and you have to be able to effectively communicate the skill set, the processes to someone else so they can just read the paper and say, okay, this is the file, follow steps 1 through 12, and get X, Y, Z results. And that's what we're about. We try to look at systems and at businesses and see what works for them. I always say your book is your business card into your business ecosystem. So how cool is that? That you have a book, a brochure, a magazine, a pamphlet that you can now give to your clients, give to your customers. And not only does it represent your business and your brand and your logo, but it also has inside information they can use.
I do want to
Right.
talk about the idea of the SOPs really just quickly, because, a lot of people are going to feel like, well, I don't have employees yet, and I don't need SOPs because I'm the one that's doing it. What about that thing that you do once a year? As a former educator, I found that people would not retain their documentation from the startup and the end of the year. And even our administrators would give us like a reinvention of the wheel every single year. And it seemed like they
Thank you.
sat down and went, what should we be doing? When I was like, didn't you have a document from last year? You could have just tweaked it just a little bit and kept everything basically the same. And then everybody could get used to what they're doing and feel good about it. Because when you do it only once a year, if you change it every single year you do it, you're going to miss things. And so I feel like the value of the SOP is also in those things. And so some of that is prepping your books for taxes and things like that. And your business has very unique needs. And so making sure that you're thinking about those things, those are areas that an SOP is perfect. And the best part about partnering with someone, because I can say this in 100% certainty working in science, is that you will write something. You will think it is the clearest thing that has ever existed. It is totally clear to you. It makes perfect sense to you. You hand it to somebody else and you ask them to execute the task, and it is unexecutable. It is simply not understandable to an individual who's not done it before.
No, and that is exactly it. And I'm going to take it even one step back. So my pool of beta readers, the folks who I will give my manuscripts to, or the authors I'm working with, chapters to as sample chapters to just review for readability and for intent and the writing style. Most of them are not nowhere close to the media communications field. They are doctors, plumbers, church officials, like all across the spectrum. And that's the reason. You
Yes.
want eyes that are not in your field, that are not your eyes. You want people to have no knowledge of what your business does or what your brand is about, but you give them a piece of paper and you say, take this and can you follow the instructions? And if that person with no prior knowledge can say yes, you have made a successful SOP.
Yep,
And that's how it
absolutely.
works. That's exactly how it works. And so when you do a business plan, and this is the big picture, right? You do a business plan, you have your summary, you have your about the business, you have the strategic goals, you have the financial forecast, and everything comes together nicely, cool. There's a part in the section that talks about the team. I know a lot of folks skip this part when it comes to business plans. They just put the titles and that's it. But you should put in there the team that you have, the team that you hope to have, right? So the team that you want to build out to, right? And then the roles and responsibilities and always put something that shows some type of training module. Like, how do you share and create an environment of I respect what you do and you respect what I do? And part of that is the SOPs. Because now, once you have your policies and procedures in place, if you are the budget person, right? And you're the one taking in the money, allocating it into the different accounts and doing the tax prep. Okay, technically, anyone should be able to do that, because what if we expand? What if we get an influx of funds? What if there's a new grant we have to apply for and we need everyone on deck to help us apply? What do we do? So having an SOP for each position, for the job duties, now makes it codified. And the codification of our processes is what makes us sustainable.
That's amazing. That's a business continuity plan unto itself, truly.
Exactly.
And the increased transparency around the role, I believe, would be an easy way to have conversations about bandwidth when someone's being asked to take on a new project. Hey, here's your scope. Here are the things that I know you're doing. Here's about how long we ballparked these processes to take place, because that is a critical component of an SOP that a lot of people leave out, that I think scientists don't, because we're always worried about it takes this long to shake it and incubate and this many, whatever. So we're really time bound in terms of a lot of our processes and what you can do at the same time overlapping when you have certain things going, because there's always efficiencies to be found, but that only goes as far as the quality that you can have doing those multiple different things. But I feel like the transparency that's created around that is, hey, there's this many hours in a day. These are the things I'm doing. This is how long they take. But also, if you need a maternity leave, if someone gets sick, I think the COVID-19 pandemic gave us the perfect way of place to start a conversation from of, hey, listen, if we didn't have you for 2 weeks and we were up the creek and we needed to be able to do the stuff that you needed to do because it was a critical time frame, how would we know how to do that?
And that's exactly it, that continuity of operations. So in my former role with Broward County, and one of the things we always talked about was having a COOP plan, right? Continuity of operations. And it just so happened, located in downtown Fort Lauderdale, every now and then we would have a gas leak somewhere on the street, right? And they would evacuate the entire building, or it would be hurricane season, whoop-de-doo. And now you have maybe 2 months of business operations that must continue without your main office being available. And that's not to mention the other things that could happen on a day-to-day, like you said, maternity leave, someone gets sick, someone wins the lotto, and adios, So having these in place is so important. And I remember it wasn't until maybe 2015, 2016, when my agency began to get serious about having SOPs. And this is after over 40 years in operation as a government agency. So can you imagine the advantages you could have as an entrepreneur, as a small business owner, as a pizza shop? Why not? Because having that codified not only makes it easier for yourself, but also for the team, right? Yeah. Because now they understand the interactions. And we're talking about many companies have existed for quite a while, okay? Amazon has been around for as long as Jeff Bezos has been around, right? Other companies like Goodyear, Ford, they've been around way longer. And what they've had over time is the ability to lock in those efficiencies you mentioned and maintain standard operations over time, right? And they've done so by codifying their laws, codifying their rules, even like Burger King did, codifying their office culture, their working culture. So now everyone knows expectations, how to interact with the guests, what customer service is about. How do you switch off with teammates from one cash register to working in the back, flipping the burgers? Those are processes. When I worked at Burger King, we had about 5 manuals about this big, about food handling procedures, which also include customer intake, keeping the bathrooms clean, different ways of preparing different meals, the temperatures and everything. We don't have to be so extensive, but we should have something that shows if we meet someone, as simple as this, if we meet someone and they might be a good fit for our networking, or we want to include them in our community, name, social media platform, skill set,
Mm,
as simple as that. And now you have a way of interacting with the public. And that's now your SOP. If you meet someone, you automatically add them to a master spreadsheet or a master CRM. You include what they do. You include maybe a touch point for a month down the road, 3 months down the road, and then you sign off on it. And that's one SOP just for intake of new customers slash network opportunities. And it's
that's amazing.
important to have.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about it from the standpoint of networking, but you're right, especially once you have a couple people and you're not a solopreneur. I think the challenge for a lot of small businesses is that they don't necessarily know when they're going to bring on someone. But having a system that is scalable early is the most important thing that you can do, because when you are ready to scale and you are ready to bring on other people, it usually is because you're so busy that you cannot be concerned about that documentation at that point. You needed to have it yesterday. Otherwise, it's going to delay your progress and your ability to get that new business and to expand yourself in that moment. And the idea of training continuity, I think, is so interesting. And once again, reflecting on being a scientist, having procedures and how many practices should you have? Should there be a limitation on the number of practices? Should there be a minimum? Should there be a maximum? How many times do you have to replicate success before the training wheels can come off and you can go do the thing independently? What does that look like inside of your business? Is that you sitting in the meeting with them, with that potential new client, so that you can be there to only answer questions when they don't need to? And that also then speaks to your leadership style. Can you handle that? Can you handle being a security blanket and not taking over the conversation? Can you be a safety net instead of the one on the tightrope in that moment? And if you cannot, who on your team could, so that you can back away from that situation, because you're probably not the right one to do it, because if you're taking over the conversation, they're never going to learn. So there's just so much wrapped up into just these SOPs. It's wild.
No, it is. And I love writing them down. And when I meet someone new and this they say, "Oh, I have a crochet hobby," I'm like, "Oh, that's pretty cool. Do you do the caps? Do you do sweaters, throw rugs?" And then they're like, "But you know what? I'm thinking of going to my local farmers market with it and just having a table, pay the $10 fee, to have a spot every other Saturday and just talk about crochet and sell my items." And the first thing I say is, "Do you have a plan?" And I slip in the word, "Do you have a business plan for it?" And they'll be like, "No, it's just a hobby." I said, "No, a hobby is when you stay at home and you do it and no one knows about it. That's a hobby."
Right.
From the time you are out in public and people know about it and you're selling it, that's not a business.
Yep.
And the first rule of business is document your process. Figure out what you do, why you're doing it, how it gets done. And scaling is all about replicating these processes over and over again. So if you go to the farmers market and you sell 5 caps, now you're out of materials and you're like, "Wow, I got to make 5 more. I have to go to 10 maybe." Now you're talking about I have to invest more money, more time. What does that look like for you? And then now you're talking about, okay, at some point, do I need to get my cousin to help me crochet also? You know? And that's one of the things I wanted to mention. A lot of times we fail to incorporate our families into the business. And speaking on families, a lot of times families should not be included in your business. That's understood. If you don't have a good relationship with a family member in person, they should not be in your business,
Right.
right?
That's excellent advice.
In more ways than one.
Yes.
In more
Yes.
ways than one.
Yeah.
And however, your business that you build, every now and then you'll realize that you have a family member. It could be a sibling, could be your offspring, could be a parent that you're like, "You know what? I think I can bring them in just for this one aspect.
Mhm.
I can maybe have them just cover the phones. I can maybe have them review my documents before I send them out. Review my contracts before I sign them. you know, and don't be afraid to ask a family member to do a small part of what you do, and that's how we also build continuity, because most businesses, and the best businesses, are family run, family oriented, because there's nothing a parent loves to see more than their child picking up some of their skills. We love it when our children pick up our sports habits and our fashion sense. We should also love it when they pick up our business acumen.
It's funny that you mentioned sports, because this is a baseball family over here. We're all baseball all the time in the spring. So I definitely can speak to that. But the idea of your business is your baby too, right? So having your
Correct.
family be part of your village that's going to nurture your baby, your business baby. It's so beautiful.
That's it. And you know what? And I'm speaking to all the new parents out there who have a newborn. This is a sidebar, but I'm gonna bring it back. If you feel like you don't want your baby to be with your parents who raised you, that's okay.
Yeah.
If you feel like your little one that you brought into this world, and you feel such a attachment, and you don't want your 6-month-old to spend overnight time with your parents, their grandparents, that's okay.
Yeah.
Don't let anyone parent shame you. If you went to the library and got about 100 books on parenting in preparation for your child, however, your parents and grandparents had no books, right? And they will say, oh, but you turned out okay, debatable.
Mhm.
Do not be shamed into letting your baby stay with your parents or your grandparents because there's a different level of preparation. It's okay. So
And
with that being
it's
said,
okay to struggle with that too, because
ex-
as someone who's been in that situation, it doesn't make your life easier. Because you
mm,
have less of a village. And then feeling like you're trusting friends or friends' parents doesn't necessarily feel easier when you already have mistrust that's come from your own family of origin. Yeah, but
yeah, that's a whole nother conversation.
oh my
But
goodness.
but back to the main point. If your business is your baby, then treat it with the same care.
Yeah.
You introduce your baby to certain individuals, and when you go to the store and you have that one person who comes up, oh, your baby is so cute. Can I hold it? No, thank you, Mr. Stranger. I don't think so.
Super
Treat
creepy.
your
Thank
business treat your business accordingly. You won't give your business to any and everyone. You would be careful, and you would have the right things in place, and you let people understand who your baby is, how they like to be held. The same with your business. Your job at the end of the day is as a steward, as a caretaker of this business plan, this business idea that you have. It might be just for a time. It might blossom into something where in 5 years, you're sitting in front of a buyout discussion with a contract for more money than you've ever seen in your life to purchase your small business that you started 5 years ago with a pipe and a dream, or you can, after 2 years, decide, you know what, this is not for me. I'm going to update my resume and go back on LinkedIn and Indeed and Monster and reapply and go back into the corporate world because this business
you.
process is not for me. And that's okay.
Yeah,
That's
it is.
okay.
Oh, I love that. And I love the way that you're helping to destigmatize all of the different pathways to success, because that's still success. You still did it.
Exactly.
You still tried. And the only thing that is a failure is not trying at all, is not giving it
Mm,
a go and holding that great idea in your heart, or that compliment, or that, positive thought, holding it and not doing anything with it and not acting on it, because you're acting on that beautiful thought is love that you're sharing with the world in that specific way. So I think that's amazing. I'm so glad that you shared that.
oh,
So
perfect.
the love of your business when you first started it compared to today, how different is it? How much, what was, I guess, did you go in with like a minimum viable product? Did you start with only one piece and the rest has kind of developed? Tell us a little bit about that journey.
Well, I always compare this journey as there's a parable in the Bible where Jesus told a story of a rich man had three servants, and he was going on a vacation for a long time, and he gave each servant a certain amount of money. He gave like 10 coins to one, 5 coins, and then 1 coin. And the guy with 10 coins, when the rich man came back, the servant doubled it. He gave him 20. And then the second servant who had the 5 coins, he doubled it and gave him 10. But the last servant who he gave 1 coin to, he just buried it. He did nothing with it. So he gave the rich man back the same coin. And the rich man asked him, why didn't you do anything with the coin? And the servant said something to the effect, I didn't know what to do with it, and I wasn't sure, and I decided to just hide it and just give you back what you gave me. And the rich man was not happy with that answer. To me, that is how we have to think of God's gifts. If you woke up this morning and you have this idea or this concept, or you're working on a project, you've been working on this book for a couple of years, you've been thinking about doing this business with your son or daughter for the past couple of months, or you're looking at a new opportunity in your 9 to 5 to either get a promotion or to do some cross training, right? Go for it. There's a reason why we have ideas. There's a reason why we have these skills that we have. Some folks are great with languages. Some folks are great with numbers. Some folks are great with people. There's a reason for that. Our goal in life is to find our purpose before the grave finds us. If we can accomplish that, that is a success. And like you said before, the journey of trying is success.
Yeah.
So you might never get there in your lifetime. That's okay. But you're on the path. And as you're on the path, you'll realize there are people ahead of you. There are people behind you. Some folks get lost in the bushes. Some folks decide to rappel over. Doesn't matter. We're all on a journey. We're all trying to get someplace, and we're all trying to find our purpose and execute it the best way we can.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. So in terms of the parable and 1 coin being given, is the thought that the scarcity mindset of the fear of losing the single coin is the reason why the gamble wasn't made, to be able to make others? Because to make money, oftentimes you do have to spend money, which is a rigged system that disproportionately impacts people who have been marginalized in terms of their money and doesn't give them the feeling that they can take those risks. Because if you only have that one last coin, taking a risk on it, what if you need a second or a third coin in order to be able to make the thing happen? That can be very challenging.
Exactly. You have to bet on yourself. And as a Christian, of course, I don't condone gambling, but you have to take a chance on yourself. When I wrote this book, Pivot, it wasn't intentionally meant to be a book. I had the idea in my mind, but what was happening in 2020, between the job loss, between the homelessness, between the illness, I was on my phone at nighttime, just in my own headspace. The family was safe. And I would just write my thoughts for the day, how I felt, what I was going through, the doubts I was having about, am I a man enough? Am I good enough? Am I able to survive this? Am I in the right mindset? What is happening? What's going on with my community? And so all of these different thoughts became sections in the book, but in a positive way, because what I didn't want to do is look back and have all these doubts and questions and negative energy, right? What I wanted, and because my background is in project management and administration operations, is to be solution oriented. So even from the design of the book cover, and this is the audiobook cover, and for those who might be listening without the visual, it is a beautiful sunflower type of plant that is superimposed with the cover of the book, Pine Cones and Spaceships, Pivot on the front. And in the background, you can see some trees and a little bit of water, right? I wanted the book to be about positivity. And the message is simple. No matter what you're going through, keep going through it. And on the other side, you will find what you're looking for. Don't give up. Don't quit. And so I used that concept to make my 1 coin that I had at the time become many coins. And when I've met people in person, talking to them from the trunk of my car, selling copies of the book, they were always inspired and they would always say, wow, that's crazy. How are you even here? How are you even alive? I'm like, well, it's the love of God, the faith of my family, and just being able to tap into my purpose, and understanding this life is not everything, but it is important. And the more kindness we can have for others, the better we can be better versions of ourselves.
That's powerful. And I love the image of the sunflower. That has been something that's been a recurring theme for me very recently. That's the pop socket on my phone is a sunflower. I just made invitations to something and put sunflowers on the sticker. So it's interesting
Mm,
that I'm seeing that come up a whole bunch. I should probably pay attention. Last year, we drove past this beautiful field up here by us, and we're in a space that is urban, rural, and suburban. Within 30 minutes you can find a farm or a city, and there was this huge field of sunflowers, and we drove past it early in the baseball season, and they were itty bitty, but they
mm,
grew so rapidly. Even just a couple of
so tall.
days later for the next one, I was like, wow, those things grow. And I had both of my boys in the car who had been sprouting up themselves, and we needed to replace, shoes and baseball pants and all that kind of stuff because they were growing. And I was like, we always say that kids grow like weeds, and I think that that's such a garbage way of representing things because it inherently implies that they don't belong in the space because we pull weeds.
Mm,
We don't want weeds. I would prefer that we said that our children have sprouted like sunflowers instead because they're
yeah.
beautiful and they are the only thing that truly matters at the end of the day. There is no purpose, there's no reason for me to continue to do anything that I'm doing without my three boys. My husband and my two boys are everything for me. They are my why. So looking at it from the standpoint of you sprouted like a weed, ugh, that's yucky. No, sprouted like a sunflower. Let's make that a thing.
Let's make that normal. Let's make that. I
Yeah.
love that. My kids are growing like sunflowers. Oh my word. And everyone will automatically know because sunflowers, you can never believe the height they can grow to unless you see one in person. And
Yeah.
when it towers over you, and then of course it does turn gradually facing the sun. That's an
Yeah.
amazing piece of handiwork that God has given us. And all we can do is sometimes be amazed by it. And I'm intentional that way also. And I hope you took pictures of the sunflowers because I wanted my writing to also represent nature and God's goodness to us. So that's why when I write my haikus, and I love haikus. And for those of you who don't know, a haiku is a Japanese style of poetry. Very simple. It is 3 lines of poetry. There has to be 5 syllables in the first line, 7 syllables in the second line, and 5 more syllables in the third line. It must mention nature within that scheme, and there is absolutely no rhyming allowed. So it's very structured, but within the structure, you can find the freedom to express yourself. And that is what poetry is about at the end of the day. Poetry is how we represent the truths of the universe and we present them to others who are also sharing and living their truths. And poetry represents to me the highest form of writing because, yeah, you can have a 20-page document, a legal document, for example, that is contract oriented and it goes all over the place. However, answer this question: is that contract moral? Is that a
Mm.
contract? And if you can answer yes or no, there in that simple question, and that's what poetry does, you have answered and given validity to those 20 pages.
That's amazing. Poetry being philosophical in nature instead of just this concrete retelling and thinking about legal documentation not necessarily being ethical. Man, that hits a lot of different things for me. That strikes a lot of different chords, especially when you consider how some of our laws can be just difficult to wrap your brain around, like being illegal to feed the homeless, or any of those kinds of things, right? And we've seen so much of it across the United States. But I love what you're saying about the haiku. And first of all, palindromes are my favorite. Almost
Ooh,
everybody knows that about me. I love palindromes. They're the best numbers. They're the best words. They're fantastic. They're so fun. They're so balanced. But the idea of the 575 kind of being palindromic and then the structure within which you're trying to find freedom in the form when you're
there you
writing
go.
inside of it. And I
There
feel
you
like
go.
that's such an amazing analog for life and for everything because there are structures within which that you have to function and you're trying to find your freedom in the form. And I think so many small businesses come out of that exact thing. Okay, this is great and doing this for this company is good, but I want a little more freedom in the form. What are the things that we have no choice but to be doing because of laws and, I don't physics like forcing us into it, right? Like, well, we have to have
Right.
gravity. Fine. Okay, we have to have that one. Sorry, can't check that off the list
Yeah.
yet.
Repeat that one.
Right. But then what are the things that we can maybe reject? Maybe we don't want to be only profit. Maybe we do want to focus on our people. Maybe we want to focus on our people that work for us while bringing value to the people who are our customers. And yeah, yes, we'd like to have some profits, but we don't want to provide maybe shareholder value. So that makes determinations for you in terms of how you're getting your funding and where you're getting started and how you do things along the way. And I think that having from the start a values inventory when you are starting a business to be able to understand what aligns and what doesn't makes it so much easier for you to have conversations when you are presented with opportunities for your business to where you can say, I don't know that that's quite values aligned. And you can negotiate from that standpoint. I'm willing to do that, but this needs to be the safeguard that's in the way because I can foresee this being a potential problem that could infringe upon my values. And for me specifically, the reason why I left corporate was because of moral injury, repeated moral injury inside of the values misalignment of working for a corporation that almost always is going to put profits over people because they need to provide shareholder value. And so I think it's easy for me to come in with a values assessment immediately because I knew all of those things and they were screaming at me the whole time in those corporate roles. And even in the public sector as an educator, we're bound by these things, but why? Gosh, this feels unethical. So being able to have that freedom, but with freedom comes great responsibility. You have to now
There
be the
you
one to
go.
hold yourself accountable to do it.
You have to. And that is a perfect Stan Lee quote from Spider-Man, aka Peter Parker. Um, Great power comes great responsibility. And I
Yes.
think that is one of the main issues in our society, right? We have entities that have great power that don't hold themselves accountable.
Right.
You know, we have the ability where we can deliberately overlook certain things that don't fit our agenda, using air
Mm-hmm.
quotes, when in reality, sustainability is about the full total picture.
Yeah.
We have a saying in the island, my mom and my grandma would say it a lot. Someone who would cut off their nose to insult their face is not to be trusted. And in essence, if you do harm to one of your members in society, you're in effect hurting your entire society.
Yeah. You're
So
hurting yourself.
exactly, you mentioned the homeless issue, how we deal with vets, how we protect our children,
Mm-hmm.
right? Population that are vulnerable in any society. Society is designed by nature and by God to take care and look after and foster the ones who can't do so for themselves. So we're not talking about a utopia where someone, for example, who is mentally impaired can leave their home, walk to the store, and come back safely because the knowledge is there with their family that the community will look after them. Cars will slow down for them. Pedestrians will give them right of way. The
Mm.
storekeeper will recognize, oh, this is John.
And
He
not
might
take
need
advantage
something
of him.
and not take advantage of him.
Mm.
Exactly. And then John, of course, can take his time, walk back home, and folks would see him, recognize him. Even if they don't know him, he is a valued member of society and we treat him as such. And until we get to that place where every single member of society is valued, not for what they can provide or for who they are, but for their very existence, We have work to do until then. I'm talking about the ones incarcerated. I'm talking about
Yes.
the ones who gossip at the water fountain about their coworkers. Yeah, I threw that in there. I'm talking about the folks who just want to be left alone and just fish.
Yep.
Everyone deserves their space. And guess what? If you want to make tons of money, go for it, right? But every decision you make should be one that's ethical, that's sustainable. If you make a decision that affects 5 people in a faraway village that no one knows about, that is unethical. Your
Agreed.
decisions have to be sustainable. And I think that's the beauty about small businesses. We have the ability because for once in our life, we can see the scope of our actions and we can see how we network and we can understand, okay, I'm building a pizza shop. How do I do so? Where am I getting the materials from? Which workers am I hiring? Will I have a give back program to the local community? You know, oh, I love woodwork. Where will I give my pizzas to? Will I open a section where we will go to the local old people's home, and just help them have a nice little hobby in their declining years, you know? So these things are what we have to look at when we build our brand, build our business. We have to be sustainable. We have to be able to have community give backs. Like, for example, even right now, if you go to my page, any platform, I do a free 15-minute chat, 1-5. And the purpose of the chat is sometimes folks just want to have ideas bounced off of someone who is knowledgeable, who is fair and unbiased, and that's it. And I don't charge for that. I'm like, listen, if you have the time to tap in for 15 minutes, I have an automated scheduler where I can speak with you for 15 minutes, no more. And then at the end of it, have a great day.
I love that. I love that. And I love the intentionality and the thinking about all of the impacts, a holistic view of your business, right?
Right.
And I've had episode 1 of this podcast, I had someone on who uses honey in some of their products because they have personal care and they source it from a local aviary. And so it's right down the street. They know it's ethical. They know that they care for them and that they're not taking more than they should. And they're not taking big orders from them either in that way. And making sure that they're leaving the bees with some too, because they need it. And they also sell honey and do other things. But thinking about that sustainability and more or less a circular economy as well, because they're also sharing other resources between each other. There's such opportunities for that, but we have to be willing to connect with people. And the idea that hurting 5 people, even in a far off place, means that you made the wrong call. Gosh, that so resonates with me because those 5 people, guess what? Those are somebody's mother, somebody's father, brother, sister, cousin, son, daughter. And it's profound the way that this many years later, and I guess maybe it's because I'm approaching 40 and I'm a mom and all of those kinds of things, but any person is someone's special person. It's someone that is their whole world. And so making sure that you are a good steward with that individual, if they are working for your company, or if they are on the receiving end of your product, or if they are part of your supply chain, is so important. And we know that today, and we've been able to connect with people in ways that we've never been able to connect before, so that we know that for 100% certainty. There's no hierarchy and difference between people. They are someone's world. I think it's really important for small businesses to think about that. And they don't always have control over their supply chains, but then putting the pressure on these bigger corporations and making sure that they understand that that is our expectation as consumers. We want that good stuff. There's a company called Phloxe, and I just have to give them an absolutely shameless plug right now. Deborah Wanza is the founder of Phloxe, and I've been talking to them about a couple of different things that they're doing, but they're compiling lists of fully vetted organizations that have start to finish gone through and checked their entire supply chain. They understand that what they're doing is sustainable. They use sustainable ingredients and materials and things like that. They are ethical in their decisions with their employees, and that they are values aligned. Because right now it's very hard for a consumer to be able to vet that information. And so what Phloxe is aiming to do is, as they start going through this and building their repository of businesses, that if you choose that, hey, fast fashion, it's not for me. So this place that always has a on sale now thing on their website, they're not going to be included on Phloxe. You'll be able to go to their website and search up sustainable clothing near me, and they'll link you up with somebody that you can rest assured they have fully vetted for you, which I think is going to need to happen as we make this transition. And eventually the vast majority of businesses are going to end up going in the right direction, because we'll make sure that our dollars dictate that that's what's required.
Exactly. And what we've realized also is COVID just highlighted a trend that's been happening, right? We have to be local first.
Yes.
You have to be strong locally, and then you expand outwards as the need exists. There's no reason why any business on any level can't get all their resources locally. And if it requires higher tech or diversified skill sets, then we're talking about building infrastructure. We're talking about diversity training and ability to perform certain high-end functions, then that's fine. But the general understanding should be fill all the slots locally first, and then you can start go regionally, nationally, internationally. This concept we've had, and started with colonialism, which we won't even touch on today.
Right.
And it goes
way too big of a topic.
That's a big one. This idea that it's okay to take resources, intellectual and physical, from one location to the benefit of another location, where the first location suffers for the lack of it. Right? I remember one time growing up, and it's very vivid to me, the local market got a notice from the Food and Agriculture Department saying, we won't be able to take any more locally sourced milk, because they had just signed a new treaty to receive canned milk into the port and have that distributed into the grocery stores. So farmers were literally emptying up vats of milk that they had collected from milking the cows. And of course, milk has a very short shelf life. And you had milk running in the streets, running into the mud, because they would not be able to sell their locally produced milk. Nothing wrong with it. It's been fine all the time, because there's now a need to have a market for canned milk from overseas. So that disparity is something that as a small business owner, you can control.
Mm-hmm.
The corporations have their own accountability they have to look forward to or pay attention to, because there's no way, there's no religion, there's no belief system in this world that doesn't have some sort of karma woven or built into it. Even folks who don't believe in a higher power understand cause and effect.
Yeah.
Because that's a scientific principle.
Yeah.
So we're going to keep gravity, and we're going to keep cause and effect.
Yeah.
Because there's no connection that those two are fundamental forces of nature.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, one of my favorite quotes, it says that the best society is one where a man plants a tree knowing that he or she might not enjoy the fruit. And It's as simple as that. We have to be able to, in our interactions with people, in our communications, in our services and product management, be able to leave people better from the meeting of us. And if we can do so, again, it's an ongoing journey. That's excellent. That's beautiful. One of my favorite quotes is from Amanda Gorman. And in her poem, The Hill We Climb, she says, if we merge mercy with might and might with right, the love becomes our legacy and change becomes our children's birthright. That's from
Yes.
her poem, The Hill We Climbed. And the concept is self-explanatory. We have to be able, not because we are strong or because we are powerful or because we have it all. That doesn't mean that we can't also be kind and merciful and understanding. They go hand in hand. There's no dichotomy. It's all
Yeah.
one. It's all one love. It's all one people. And the only way to do so is by understanding the differences are just for flavor. The differences are
Yes.
just for flavor, but we are all the same.
Oh my gosh, that is so beautiful. And I feel like that is the embodiment of tiny but mighty. You're talking about thinking globally and acting locally. And that to me, that's what tiny but mighty means to me. Small businesses make the difference in our communities. They're the first ones to donate to the local sports team so that they can have a name on the back of their jersey. And they're
Yes,
the first ones to show up when their neighbors need something. And they're the first ones that are still open up until the last couple of seconds before that emergency is happening because they have the local grocery store and they know that they might have that last thing that somebody really needs in the moment that
go,
they need it. And
go.
they're holding the line. Gosh, it's so beautiful to think about all of the things that you just mentioned. And from First Nations people here in the United States, their idea of stewardship and their decision making process was always
Mm,
based upon making decisions that 2 generations later would be impacted by, and always having that in their mind. And that really is what you're talking about with that tree and the planting, and not maybe not getting the fruits of that tree, but the labor is worthwhile because it's an investment into your grandchildren's future. And I feel like corporations, just the story on the condensed milk, that in a nutshell, it's it. There's a CEO somewhere who decided that he needed to grow or she needed to grow the company by such and such percent. And they were like, how are we going to do that? Because we've saturated this market. Let's go here. And then they find somebody who's willing to just, if you line my pocket, I'll line yours. Okay, sounds good. And because
exactly.
money talks. And now you have all of this milk running down the street. The visual image that that provides of the absolute abhorrent waste that can happen in the face of these things, just to make sure that one specific entity is the one that benefits and profits off of the situation. On top of the fact that the condensed milk is definitely not as good for people as that cow's milk that just went to waste. That's the second point. On top of the fact that, third of all, the ramifications to the environment of now shipping this stuff instead of just having that local stuff, and then whatever ends up happening when the milk finds its destination and then sits and curdles and, bacteria and stuff like that. Only you can prevent the zombie apocalypse, my friend. Let's be careful with all of these kinds of things.
I think we just found our topic for our next conversation beyond the two that we have planned, right? So we have one
Right.
more next week. We're going to talk about the zombie apocalypse,
Ooh.
and there's so many different facets to it, not just from a biblical perspective, of course, and not just from a medical outbreak perspective, as we just witnessed somewhat with COVID, and how unprepared rather, we are for any type of disaster on any scale, right? And trust me, like here in Florida, and I was a shelter manager during the hurricane season a couple of times, and I can tell you from now, we are nowhere near close to being prepared to handle any type of storm, especially back to back, or you can
Right.
call it done. Our goose is cooked, literally. But just from the aspect of being prepared, right? Because to me, that's what the zombie apocalypse and the whole conversation. And before, it was only us nerds and blurs who talked about it, right?
Right.
Because it was our games and our books and so forth. But it's become more mainstream now,
Yeah.
So I'm glad folks are finally realizing that it's possible. However, we already knew about this. And the conversation is about preparing, being somewhat physically fit, because the number one rule of the zombie apocalypse, don't be the slowest person in the group, right?
Right.
And then being somewhat aware of the news, not just the news that they want you to know, but the news they're not talking about. Like,
Right.
why is there only one seed bank in the world? Or is there? You know?
Mm.
So these are kind of conversations. So you're telling me if all the crops in the entire world failed, only the one in Norway gives us the opportunity to replenish our entire supply across the entire planet. And that's our number one global. That's the best we could come up with.
Well, and I recently found out that there are First Nations folks across the globe that have their own versions of it. So hopefully that
Thank
brings
you.
you a little solace.
A
But
little bit.
they have seen the writing on the wall well ahead of the scientific community. But yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Having no redundancy. Where's the business continuity plan on that one? I'd like to be
Thank
able to
you.
see that.
Thank you. I want to see a document of that, giving us Eric Snowden vibes, but we need to have something in place. And I love the fact too, and what my family and I did is we always made sure we had some kind of plan. In the primary school several years ago, they were doing this very much in the public school system too, and the private school system, fire drills,
Right.
Not active shooter drills, which is a whole nother conversation,
Mm.
but fire drills at home, just to be, prepared. So folks will be running around trying to grab teddy bears and not know, like, let's meet someplace or let's go into the front lawn or the back lawn. Like, have these conversations with your family,
Right.
and that's part of just prepping, being prepared and preparing for, just have a small plan, one time a week, just have someone randomly have a whistle, give it to a random member of the family, and have them blow like 5 times. And when you hear that 5 whistles, you act as if we are activated. And let's execute the plan and let's see which family member can do it best and the fastest. It's a fun way, a fun family Friday night as a game night, but it's also preparing you for an emergency situation.
Wow. That's very interesting to think about. And it's funny because we have cats. I don't know if you guys have pets.
Ooh,
Yeah. So we have 2 dogs and 2 cats. And now the dogs in general are going to be easier to get to come when they're called.
yeah, just
When
following,
we,
yes.
when we first got cats, I was very nervous because I was like, gosh, they feel that energy ramp up and they're going to go hide. Well, I'm
Yes.
wrong because I was absolutely wrong because my husband is a dog person who fell in love with both of these cats and these cats fell in love with him. And now they're just dogs and it's fine. As long as he's the one that calls, we're good. All good. We'll be able to get them out without a cat whistle.
I'm glad you mentioned that too. What about your pets?
Yeah.
So we don't have pets. But no, that's important because we have seen too many stories of the father goes back in or the kid is hiding under the bed and looking for their cat or their pet or whatever. And no one noticed that they're not together on the lawn safe. So something as simple as that. And I always say, before you start business with family, you always practice with family. So let's see, have a Saturday prayer meeting and see who shows up. Because if you can't show up to a Saturday prayer meeting without a very good reason, how can I expect you to show up for a board meeting?
Right. Right. And you are running a business when you're running a family. I mean, when you're thinking about it, your children are your product at the end of the day. And we don't think about it in that way enough because I think we would value our children more because
Ooh, that's
that
a
is
good
your
one.
product. That's your outcome. How they're going to move through the world, the things that they're going to know, the things that they are going to hold in their hearts and believe, you are responsible for helping them to find the resources. And I don't necessarily believe in being the sage on the stage the entire time in terms of it. I think that discovery is very important for them. As an atheist myself, my youngest son is very fascinated by the church that we're getting ready to go to today to be able to drop off something to a friend of mine who I'm working on a couple of projects with. And she's a pastor. And he's very excited to go meet Pastor Lynn and go hang out at this church. He just wants to be able to be in this church. And we go to a restaurant right across the street. He just wants to be able to be there. And I love that for him. I'm always excited when I don't burst into flames when I walk into a church. That's always very exciting for me. But, and my oldest is kind of very like in the middle of like, well, it's a person and he could care less. He just loves people. So he wants to go and be able to see that. So it's interesting for me. I don't want to dictate to him, no, you shouldn't want to be here. Or you shouldn't be curious. Hey, listen, you want to go explore? Let's go. She's fantastic. She's very open-minded. She's a philosopher and so deeply intellectual about her faith that I feel confident that him having a conversation with her, she's not going to speak in absolutes or black and whites. She'll be able to have that nuanced conversation because truly a lot of the Bible is parables and it's meant to be lessons. It's not meant to be a historical account that's an accurate retelling that has no wiggle room, right? In most of the moments. So I feel like she'll be a good steward with that for him so that when he gets curious and he's asking questions, I'm confident that she'll answer them in a way that's respectful and not indoctrinating. I don't like culty, for lack of a better word, which is important to me. I need it to be healthy and balanced if he's going to be introduced to it. Thank you so much for joining us on the Tiny But Mighty podcast today for the first episode of this 2-part series with Dwight Thompson. I am so grateful for all the time that you have spent hanging out with us, having this philosophical conversation and thinking about ethics in business, because, that's not just for the big corporations. That's for the small businesses too. We need to make sure that we are doing these values assessments and keeping up with our documentation and holding ourselves accountable. That's very important. And as always, this is your reminder to shop small. Thank you so much.